Among the many factors driving international migration, climate change is one that should move to the top of the list.
Clearly, climate change is an important ingredient to the immigration issues, but it is far from the only one. Violence is right up there with it.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you. So glad you're joining us today for today's subject. You heard in the opening remarks where we're going with this. But before we get started into the actual discussion, I'd like for you to meet our panelists. So let's begin with the gentleman to my right, and then we'll work our way around the table and learn about everybody and what they do.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. I serve as senior minister in First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm an Assemblies of God minister, and I work at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, as Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm President of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm Dan Levin. I'm the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. As you see, we have a great panel assembled here today. People from various backgrounds, faiths, different professions even. But we're all here for this discussion today, and so let's get to our subject. Nearly every day for the last 3 years, our southern border with Mexico has been a topic of discussion on our nightly news. In some cases, the discussion has centered around the wall, or illegal immigration, sanctions, and how to stop refugees from entering into the U.S. Our news has also highlighted how our government has separated children from their mothers and their fathers, and of course, the infamous 30 by 30 so-called cages, which hold 20 or more children at a time. It is fair to say, as we Americans have seldom stopped to ask, why are so many people migrating or seeking asylum, particularly from Guatemala, a country bordering on Mexico's southeastern border? On June 5, 2019, Nicholas Kristof wrote an opinion piece for the New York Times. Seldom do we hear on our nightly news what Kristof addressed in his article. The title of the essay was this: "Food Does Not Grow Here Anymore." In his editorial, Kristof shared the stark choice for some Guatemalans: watch their crops wither and maybe die with them, or migrate. The bottom line is, according to some climate scientists, Guatemala is one of the top 10 countries in the world being impacted today by climate change. Kristof argued that Guatemala immigration is desperation. This desperation often reflects drought and severe weather linked to climate change, close quote. Or as a mother from one village has said, food does not grow here anymore. That's why I would send my son north. I'd like our panelists to consider these things with these questions in mind. They answer these things. First of all, why are we as Americans not asking the question, why are so many families from Guatemala trying to enter into the United States? Another question, what should the church or the synagogue and the mosque do in the midst of these horrific human tragedies? I'm sure there are many other questions we could ask as well, but let's start with those. Let's go back to those who helped to begin the program. And Reverend Plumley, welcome to the program. More thoughts on the subject on this, please, if you would.
Thank you very much. I think this is an important topic because it's one that is growing. And this is one that's going to be with us for a long time. Indeed, the National Resource Defense Council has said that climate change is the one factor among the many factors affecting migration around the world. Climate change is the one that our military experts and security experts believe will continue to drive migration for many, many years. There are lots of causes for migration. Economic disruptions, revolutions, and gang violence, drug trafficking, human trafficking, all those things are important and must be addressed. Climate change is one that sometimes we hesitate to address. Indeed, there are a lot of people who refuse to even admit that it's going on, or that it has a human, it's affected by human beings. But the World Bank estimates that 140 million people will be forced, in the next 30 years, will be forced to seek new homes and even new countries. Those who live in sub-Saharan Africa, 140 million of those folks are going to be on the move in the next 30 years simply because of what's happening in the climate in that part of the world. That is certainly something that needs to be taken into consideration and dealt with at an international level.
All right, thank you. Now, Dr. Robick, you had mentioned violence being of equal concern, among many other things, I'm sure, but you particularly focus in on violence being one of the causes or reasons for migration.
It's a huge cause. I want to come back and say I agree with Tom that climate change is a huge issue, and it may be the driving force in a lot of cases. But on the West Coast, we get a lot of people coming from Salvador, in particular, from El Salvador. And my son worked there for 4 years. And I've been down there and seen that violence firsthand. And I've seen people being hit up for money. I've seen the military as they're trying to guard against some of these gangs. The gangs are now going into the churches and demanding money so that they can stay in business and so forth. It didn't used to be that way. I think my trouble with limiting it simply to Guatemala is that Guatemala is a small potato compared to everything else together. You're talking about 140 million. I take that new people because I'm already familiar with the figure of about 160 million people who are homeless or stateless at the moment because of wars and so forth in the Middle East and the like. And so if you're talking about 140 more because of climate change in Africa alone, I mean, we're talking substantial numbers. That's not going to change. And the thing that frustrates me the most, I think, about our government, and I don't mean simply Trump or the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or anything, I think it has to do with the fact that we don't ever ask the question why. We never ask the question why. We always kind of have these fast answers that we've got to get quick response, and it means giving money away. Okay, so I don't mind giving money away. I really don't. But what I want to do is to ask the questions why. What can we do to stop the source of the problem? And we very rarely do that kind of thing. So I'm really frustrated with that kind of thing. I know people are coming to Pasadena. We get them all the time. I run into them on the streets and so forth. They're here for a better life. They're for economic enhancement. They're here escaping the gangs. They're here escaping drugs. They're here because they need food. All of them are asking, give us some hope. Help us, with our hope issue. It's not being addressed by governments. And to me, that's the most frustrating thing in the world, because theoretically, the governments are the ones that are addressing these things. Mm-hmm. Churches can only do so much.
So you're suggesting also politics has a lot to do with it as well.
Has a lot to do with it.
In terms of who will cooperate with whom,
yes,
in order to address what the issues you have just raised.
Right.
Bishop Olson, your thoughts on the subject, please.
I think it's as far as the question, as far as what can we do as the church, I think one of the real important things is really encouraging good stewardship on the part of our congregants. Stewardship of resources. I think that what we receive is what we use is a gift from God. It's a grace that we have a responsibility to put back. What we've used, that we really don't have the world. It's just simply our endless supply of resources to do whatever we want with it, and certainly not to hoard it at the expense of our neighbor. I think that that's really at the heart of, I don't think global warming is that new. Maybe the science behind it is new, but certainly there's a sense of good custodianship of resources in time to prevent and to sustain community in time of famine, in time of other things of which we have no control. I think it's only a modern phenomena that has said that basically all of nature is just our resources to plunder at will if we have the capacity and the forces to do so. And I think we need to turn away from that because it's selfishness and it's selfish and sinful.
All right, thank you. And Rabbi Levin, good to have you here today. Your thoughts, please.
I think it's difficult to help people recognize that actions that they seem to think are only localized can have global impact, because they can't necessarily see in their own myopia the impacts of their actions on those that live in lands far away. We have to think to ourselves, what does it mean if the preferred option is to take your young children and to begin a journey of 1,000 miles overland, dealing with some of the most notorious dangerous people on the planet, to try to make it to the southern border of the United States with all of the complications that come with even trying to cross that border? If that's the better option than staying home, that tells you a little bit about the disparate circumstances in which people live. Yep. So I think that part of what we need to do is to try to relieve those with whom we work and live of their myopia. And the second thing is to try to encourage the leaders of our country not to be myopic either, to realize that we are part of a community of nations and that we need to figure out how to build collaborative partnerships so that places like El Salvador, Guatemala, and places from which people are fleeing can be helped by the strength of our country to be places toward which people flee, because we have created opportunities and safety for people to live their lives in peace.
All right, thank you very much. Let's come over here. Kenneth Peterson, glad to have you here. We'd like to hear your thoughts on the subject, too. Please.
Well, I appreciated and appreciate Christoph's opinion that he's written. And he only, of course, used Guatemala because it's out of the, a little bit out of the box from how we normally understand immigration problems. And consequently, I think that what he is helping us understand here is that all refugees, all people fleeing, is not simply because of violence or any one particular thing, but there's actually a critical situation on the ground in relationship to no food. And what's interesting here is that under the previous administration, people were actually working in Guatemala exactly on this problem, and all that funding has now been cut, so that Guatemala no longer is receiving the funding that it was receiving to be able to work with these particular issues in relationship to climate change. It is so easy for us to be able to lump all immigrants into one category or one reason why they are fleeing. And today, I think that we are seeing time and time again that being cut from that same piece of cloth simply does not reflect the real situation that's going on in the plight of so many people.
All right, Dr. Luxton, your comments, please.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Clearly, there's a lot of reasons why people will leave their own country and move. I do think we get into a cycle of being very reactive. Being reactive is often not very often a good thing to be. I know I'm talking about something that's completely impossible now, but I'll say it anyway. I wish that we could move dealing with these kind of social issues with our other countries out of an elected political arena. because I think that it is the politics that gets in the way, that prevents us having sustained responses to situations that might continue. Because it's politics, you put it here and then you think, oh, no, we need to move our money over here. Oh, no, we need to do this. So we never get that sustained support and connection, because if we look to just a certain percentage of the money that we keep moving to watch the border here or do this over here, and we had a sustained amount of money or support mechanisms where we could really work with a country in saying, okay, how can we help you as you deal with these issues in your country? Maybe we could make headway. But sadly, as I say, I'm being idealistic, I realize.
Thank you, Reverend Plumley.
Yeah, but
yes.
the politics drives even those non-political organizations. We did have a lot of research being done on climate change and its effects all over the world. The Centers for Disease Control and other parts of our government and every bit of that was not only cut in its funding, it was any government employees were forbidden to even take up that stuff anymore, simply because a political decision was made that climate change doesn't exist, and that's where politics does impact these things, and there has to be a political element in any of these solutions.
Thank you. Dr. Robeck, further thoughts on the subject, please.
Well, as you were talking about this political rhetoric that stops things and the position of certain people in our government, I was thinking of President Mbeki in South Africa, who for years sat in denial that they had an AIDS problem. And yet it was a very real problem, and it took enormous numbers of lives. So I think that anytime we put our head in the sand and just go into denial about the reality of what's going on around us, I think we're all in trouble. I would say one further thing is, we're talking about Central America here, and the U.S. government has meddled in Latin American affairs for centuries. And I think we need to be listening instead of telling all the time what these countries ought to be doing. The question is, can we trust any of them? And if we can't, why is that?
Can we trust any of those Central American
Central
countries?
American countries. And why is that?
You might want to ask the other question too.
We
can't trust them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it is a more complicated situation, as was said on a different program, actually, when we were discussing something similar but different. So Rabbi Levin, other thoughts on this, please?
I think it's very dangerous when we look at the affairs and the challenges that impact other states and say, not my problem. Mm-hmm. But it's normal and natural to prefer the people in your own family, right? I might care very much for your children, but I'm not paying for them to go to college, right? I'm sure that the players on the Dutch national team are very nice women, but I rooted for the Americans because that's my people. But at the same time, that there's nothing wrong with preferring the people in your country and helping to solve the very real problems of people that live within these borders. That doesn't give us license to say, well, we have no warrant or need to be concerned with the problems that are south of our border either.
And that involves many different governments, and as said, we've got some history there with those governments. Ken Peterson.
But it's exactly for that reason that when you said earlier in the program that people were fleeing for many different reasons. And it's exactly for that reason that we have more than one piece of cloth. And if we don't understand the reasons why they're fleeing, in each particular political situation, we're going to be bound to make the same mistakes time and time again.
And Bishop Olson, you wanted to add something here.
Well, I think I'd like to see a little hope in this, in the sense that I think what's different about this issue as opposed to a lot of issues that we've dealt with or refused to deal with for hundreds of years, violence and slavery, all of this, is that the climate and the ecology is the one thing that we can't escape having in common. If it affects one area, it affects what affects the other area, and it should, I hope, prompt us to realize that there's a lot more that unites us than divides us, and there are responsibilities and rights that are correlative to that reality.
And that'll have to be the last statement in this particular segment. There is another segment to come, but before we get there, I'd like for you to stand by for this important announcement, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Welcome back, and thank you for standing by. And I will encourage you to go to the website. As Mark has said, there are some things there about the Town Hall Estates I'm sure you'd like to learn about. This wonderful organization, very caring organization. Their clients appreciate them very much, and I'm sure you would too. We're going to go to our summary statements just now. For that, let's begin with Canon Peterson. You're first.
I would like us, each person in the viewing audience, to ask the question and to think about, what would it take for me to have to leave my home, to go to another country, to walk 4,000 miles to be able to get to that country? What would it take? How desperate do I have to be? And this is the decision that every single immigrant, asylum seeker, is having to face. You ask the question, what would it take for me to be in that position?
All right, thank you very much. Now, Bishop Olson.
I think that we have a responsibility to use our resources well, to share those things that we are given and entrusted with, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of others in our worldwide community. That what we waste does affect other people negatively, and it causes objective harm. And an understanding of us as one global community brings upon us responsibilities as well as rights.
Thank you. Dr. Luxton, your summation, please.
You know, ideally, we would say that what we've heard around this table, that we should have responsibility for the other, that it is, that as people reach out to us, we should be responsive and so on, and we should listen to what the issues are. But even if we take the other route, the route that says our first priority is to ourselves, it seems to me that when we're only waiting for people to come to the border with all in their masses, with all their different reasons, we're never going to be able to manage that in a just way and really look at the issues. So we have to reach out beyond our borders to look and try and resolve things at the base for ourselves as well as for the others.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Rabbi Levin, your summation, please.
I come from a people that over the course of history has been forced to flee many, many times. And I think about how incredibly privileged I am that my family gets to live here in the United States of America. And I think with that privilege comes responsibility and an appreciation for the blessing of that privilege. But the thing that I would also add is that hopefully necessity can be the mother of invention. Sometimes with small investments, with technology and know-how, we can improve the lives of people far away more than we could ever imagine. And hopefully we can put our heads together and find ways to make those investments so that we can make a difference, so that people do not have to undergo the extraordinary nature of what it means to flee their homes.
All right, thank you. And now, Dr. Robeck, your summation, please.
Yeah, if I read Scripture correctly, we are all of one flesh. We human beings, we're all come from a common ancestor in the persons of Adam and Eve, however one reads that. And we've been called by God to love Himself and to love our neighbors. And unfortunately, we don't always understand ourselves as living in a neighborhood. We understand ourselves as living in our neighborhood, and who cares about the rest of them that are on the other side of the fence or the wall or the river or whatever else it might be, but whatever separates us. And the reality is that the rhetoric that we are facing right now from both parties is really unhelpful in helping us to understand and appreciate and respect the neighbor and to love the neighbor as ourselves. And it is contributing more significantly to the problems surrounding the immigration debate by raising the fears of people when in fact those fears are absolutely uncritical and unnecessary.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Reverend Plumley, your summation, please.
Thank you. The weather reporter's map will have on it state borders and national borders, but pictures from outer space do not have those borders. It is those pictures that I think we should keep in mind when we're dealing with migration issues. Just like the weather that moves in certain ways, there is no respecting of a border in a severe drought, in ocean warming, in the severity of storms. As those things increase, as wildfires increase, as the acidification of the ocean increases, it is something that affects all of us, and we need to react and respond appropriately for all people.
All right, thank you very much, and to everyone, so glad you could be here today for this discussion, and particularly to you as you've tuned in today, a very special thank you. We hope you'll come back again next time. But until that time, again, I'll encourage you to go to the website and do send me a letter. Tell me what subject you'd like to hear discussed, or maybe you have more than one topic you'd like for us to consider. We'll be happy to consider that and try to work it into the program. And then also do learn about the Town Hall Estates, the organization we referenced a few moments ago. These particular people can be very compassionate and are very sympathetic to the needs of their clients and to their families. So thank you for tuning in today. But for now, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.